everybody, and this webinar to mark the publication of the fourth Global Mobile Ad Revenue Report, produced in collaboration between IAB Europe, the US IAB Mobile Marketing Centre of Excellence, and HS Technology. I'm Alison Senna, Executive Business Advisor at IAB Europe, and I'm going to be your moderator during this session. We'll start with a few household details. The will last 45 minutes. That's going to be a 15-minute presentation, a 50-panel discussion, and 5-minute Q&A. Please note that the report will be available to download from the IAB Europe website after the webinar. If you share the live presentation with your colleagues, the report will also be available on the website shortly. Before we start, let's take a moment to ensure that everyone's ready and familiar with the webinar control panel. So you should see the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You minimize the panel by clicking on the double arrow button in the upper left-hand corner and expand by doing the same again. You'll see that there's a chat panel and a Q&A panel. Technical queries and issues should be submitted in the chat panel to the IAB Europe team, and we will respond to those. You can submit questions for speakers using the Q&A panel located near the bottom of the control panel. If you need any help during the session, you can raise your hand by clicking on the small hand above the chat panel. So here, technically you should be submitted via the chat panel and questions for the speakers via the Q&A panel, and we will gather those questions together and respond after the Q&A discussion with our panel of experts. So I'd like to introduce today's presenter and panelists. So we have Daniel Knapp, who's Director of Advertising Research at IHS Technology. He's going to take us through the Google Mobile Ad Revenue Report results. And then he's going to be joined by panelists Ben Card, Head of Mobile EMEA at MEC, Victor Teich, Head of Mobile EMEA at Sanoma, and Laszlo, Senior Director, Mobile Marketing Centre of Excellence at IAB in the US. So very much for joining us today, and thanks to the audience for joining us. And I'll hand over to Daniel to take us through the results.
Thank you, Alison, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. I'm Daniel Knapp from IHS Technology, and I'm going to present you the results of the mobile study that we did in relation with the AFBs. We dive directly into the data, and you can see it has been a positive story, a very positive one for mobile in 2014. In euros, the global markets jumped from 14.5 billion to 3.9 billion, equaling a 65% increase like-for-like. In dollars, this would equate to $31.8 billion. Now, with any study, the question, of course, how did we arrive at the data, and what is the method underlying this collection? As you know, there's a plethora of different figures around mobile, circling around. Yet, reliable, actionable figures is quite difficult to achieve. Mobile advertising revenue faces similar challenges measuring mobile in general. The market is extremely fragmented, and there's a lack of standards, and competing providers or different countries have different ways of sizing and defining things. For the fourth year in a row is work together with IAB Europe, the IAB US Mobile Centre of Excellence, as well as all other IABs around the world, to convey meta-analysis of mobile spend and gathered by those IABs. With the IABs being extremely close to the market, with their core and other members, have access to mobile advertising spend, and have established and recognized surveys operating in their countries. Yet, different rates of measuring advertising, and depending on how mature those surveys are. Certain companies who are key players in mobile might be included or excluded. So it was to harmonize the spend across reported all IABs and a comprehensive figure, maps of the countries not covered by IAB, and to incorporate, wherever possible, figures from companies that are measured or not part of the IAB. So, and this allowed us to, over 160 plus countries, arrive at this figure of 23.9 billion euros. What was for this staggering growth? Remains the fastest growing ad format globally, and there is a range of factors supporting this. First, there's mobile infrastructure. 3G, 4G penetration rising. We see more affordable data plans globally and lower data volumes associated with those data plans. So improvements of network coverage help to fuel the promise that mobile is really always on. In countries we have infrastructural gaps where speeds aren't that fast, or where mobile data-driven mobiles aren't that affordable, we have seen significant effort by the ad industry to provide ad formats that are in bandwidth. We see the global rise of streaming services, and in particular their connection with operators, Spotify, Pandora, and others are examples who are often now offered in a bundle with Telefonica, Vodafone, or other operators, allowing a direct to the consumer. Screens also allow for better creatives, easier to use, and so forth. Increasingly, we also see that mobile is not any more separate than the overall media planning, but integrated in a holistic media strategy. The potential of mobile, as we saw it, could be translated, the targeting, location benefits, creative innovations, and so forth. Over the last 2 years, we've seen significant increases globally in technology and better education, plus the digitization of ad units by IABs and also other initiatives is changing this. We also see publishers really embracing mobile by launching mobile websites, which outside of the US often had still been a minority. We see a more mature mobile ad industry providing the canvas for mobile advertising growth. But how maturity is defined really varies by format, and I think we should take a deep dive into those different mobile ad formats. That 2014 really was the year of display, which significantly increased its share over search and messaging, all three different formats that we track in this study. Display includes banners, videos, rich media, in-street advertising, in-app advertising, but also open web and app-based advertising. So we saw display expanding its share, and key factor for this was the mobile ad infrastructure. Ad is not as needed as in mobile, as it's a very fragmented industry with a lot of scattered supply across different markets and inventory. We know there's measurement challenges due to cookie issues and so forth, but we are now moving from mobile fragmentation towards standardization. A huge issue in advertising in the ad tech world, in particular in mobile, but again, new startups and their scale plus initiatives are now successfully combating fraud. We also saw display for a long time on the brink of repeating the same mistakes that the banner industry at the end of the 90s, putting ad prices down the spiral, ad creative, obstructing the text, and so forth. We've seen in the better ad formats, the news feed, the flow, the swipe behavior now actually allows a better content integration on mobile than on desktop. With concentration of ad spend among fewer players, which allows for greater scale and efficiencies, driving the market overall. Already mobile isn't standalone anymore, while omni-channel marketing remains utopia, a dream. Mobile is now booked cross-channel with desktop across different devices and so forth. On search, we see search is growing mainly on volume as user behavior shifts to mobile devices, but the price deflation in mobile, which we've seen over the last couple of years, is slowing down. Messaging is a mixed picture. The operator is losing share, but OTT messaging is growing its share of the messaging pie, but overall a very, very mixed market with really, really different growth rates by country, resulting to an overall share loss. The year display obviously means that mobile display adds the most euros or dollars to its advertising portfolio. In 2014, 4.8 billion of mobile ad revenues were added to the display sector versus 4.4 for search, just 177 for messaging. That growth really is a three-tier growth: display outperforming search and messaging together. We expect this momentum to sustain over the next couple of years as the innovations in display that we've seen, particularly in the US, as I'll show you in a minute, are now swapping over to Europe and other countries. North America remains the largest mobile ad market. We've seen in 2013 in our study Asia-Pacific just moderately ahead of North America, but North America now has consolidated its position as a leader, widening the gap to Asia-Pacific. Why is the case? We see mobile innovations often that are happening on a global scale, first being tried and tested and rolled out in North America. We're really a two-speed region. We see some of the fastest growing countries in mobile, China, Indonesia, Malaysia, and others, with overall relatively low volume due to the nascent nature of the ad market, colliding with more mature countries, South Korea and Japan in particular. Overall in Asia, something that we see in other parts of the world, namely local mobile ecosystems. Japan, South Korea, but also due to political and other reasons in China. This is good for growth on the one hand, because you can focus on the national market. There's a greater degree of standardization and easier user uptake due to less competition of services in those markets. But long term, it's also an obstacle because the R&D innovations required for mobile really need the entire globe as a battleground. In the end, we see a very fragmented market. Basically, it's Europe, it's UK and the Nordics versus the rest. The one of the highest shares of ad revenue of overall on an ad revenue globally. The Nordics has extremely mature mobile markets with very high 4G penetration are following suit. But in particular in other mature markets, large ad markets like Germany, we see mobile still lagging behind as publishers lack mobile adoption and media planners are more conservative than in other countries. In Southern Europe, we still see a skew towards messaging and often a lagging mobile infrastructure. Middle and Africa, again, paints a very, very heterogeneous picture. North Africa was actually flat this year, mainly due to political and economic issues. We see the Middle East, the Arab countries in particular, quite strong around the Gulf. These countries used to have a scale problem with a very small local population, but they have a large foreign population which is increasingly middle class and opening itself to the consumer markets. So this is now fueling the growth mainly through expat population. Here in Africa, we see extremely strong growth in messaging, and also now as we see an improvement in mobile connections of banner advertising. Latin America is a social media market. We see globally the highest share of social media users versus overall internet users, and also the most engaged ones. Yet the market is not driven by smartphone adoption because the rich-poor divide remains, and the use of smartphones is not growing. It's merely just replacement cycles. Economic troubles in countries like Argentina. Now IHS has just downgraded its economic forecasts for Brazil, which is all issue. Plus we see a post-football blues where just at the Football World Cup in Brazil, ad spend was significantly slowing down as all spend was concentrated across this one mega event, mainly around television, meaning that budgets from other media were moving away. So this slowed down growth a little bit for Latin America, and the dominance of television with economic troubles of the region also mean that growth won't be as strong as we still expected a year ago looking forward. This global picture is really replicated if we take a share-based approach. North America increased its share Pacific slowly reduced its share. Europe, we see the innovations in UK and the Nordics were enough for the region to increase its share, and we saw a fairly stable picture in the rest of the market. But Middle and Africa, very strong growth paired with its all low volume only allowed it a 0.1% increase on the total. On the advertising side, we can see that North America surged ahead, as I've shown previously, for the overall market. Asia Pacific still was strongest market a year ago, but in particular, social media helped fuel the North American market. We look in mobile search, we see an unchanged regional ranking over the last couple of years. North America remains extremely strong, usually due to concentration and scale of search. We see other markets sitting behind. Again, local search preferences play a role that's hindering scale and so forth. The gap between the smaller and the larger mobile ad regions is less pronounced if we look at messaging, where we see still very strong growth in Latin America and the Middle East, and as I'll show you in a second, also the largest share of mobile advertising goes to this format in those regions. Yet you can see growth overall is slowing down. Telcos battle with OTT providers, and our advertising can often take over the marketing tasks, in particular on direct response, that were previously associated with messaging. So we see budget migration to mobile play, in particular in the performance-based segment as well. As I said, there's a strong different distribution across formats globally, where we see America is the top display market, followed by Asia Pacific. Europe is still extremely search heavy, and Middle East and Africa and Latin America are centered around messaging. The North American mobile display market, as we alluded to more frequently in this webinar already, is growing the strongest, followed by other regions. But we, in particular, room for growth in Europe as publishers migrate their websites to more platforms, and more are adopting a mobile-first approach, which will help close this growth gap over the next couple of years. But America really is the region that is pacing ahead. The growth in Middle East and Africa in display is largely attributable to the growth from the basis and the extremely rapid surge of smartphone penetration and the middle class. Search, on the other hand, we see a lot of mature markets that are growing on a fairly consistent basis. The only outlier here is Middle East and Africa, again due to the fact that growth comes from extremely low bases, and the region is now surging, whereas we see little differences in aggregate across different regions elsewhere. Although there are local differences, again, if we look at China, for instance, versus Japan, you'd find huge differences within Asia Pacific umbrella category. In Europe overall, we see a fairly homogeneous picture of mobile growth, and in America, the picture is also fairly homogeneous. I'd like to wrap up with this, the presentation of the mobile figures. As you've seen, I've presented them in euros here, as this is an IAB Europe webinar, but all information is also available in US dollars. To the press release, which is going out after this presentation, a method section is included where you can exactly see how we define each format, with exchange rate we have used, and so forth. You'll also now be able to look at the released numbers and see a timeline of 3 to 4 years, allowing you to make more longitudinal comparisons than before. But this, back over to Alison.
Daniel, that was a really clear picture of what's happening across a really varied landscape globally. you could just add one comment to us on why it's so important that we do this report. What does it add for us to our overall insight of digital?
Mobile is a bit of a paradox. Its main promise is the local nature, the great local and the granular targeting that you can do, and the proximity of the device to users' everyday life. But at the same time, mobile is an extremely global medium, as we see these targeting capabilities being rolled out on a global scale. More than other media, we see regional or even global campaigns in mobile. So it means that you really need to have a global picture of where the market is going, which local studies alone can't provide. It depends on the perspective. For instance, from a perspective of advertisers, it's important to see how regions really differ in their more composition, which formats are leading in some markets versus others. For agencies, it's to see which markets are more mature, which ones have developing potential, and for publishers, in particular international ones, such global figures, guidance for which markets to develop and invest in next. For the M&A community, such figures are very similar, in particular when it comes to valuing or assessing the potential of companies seeking funding.
Thank you. So I'd like to bring out the rest of our panelists into the discussion now, so Ben, Victor and Joe. And perhaps we can kick off with you, Ben, because you're, I think, really placed to follow on from those comments of Daniel's about seeing the growth of campaigns globally. And what do you think the innovations are that we're seeing that are helping mobile to increase its share of online spend in particular?
Hi there, and first of all, thanks for Daniel for presenting those figures. It's good to see that the growth is continuing as we would expect. With the innovations, I think a lot of innovation in mobile has dare I happened. I think it's now time. We're seeing the brand growth coming from the fact that basically large formats are entering the market. Things like the minimum 300 by 250s or the full page. We're seeing a lot more in-feed ads. These are the sort of ads that we used to in social networks, and so basically, we're actually able to observe them much more. And of course, video is playing a massive part of this. Getting video right is also complicated, and that's not being done hugely well at the moment. But certainly, I think these are the three things that are driving brand advertising, and it's getting this the more creative side of mobile advertising interested.
Bringing everybody else in, what do you think are the challenges that are remaining? What are the things that we really need to work on?
Sorry. The connection was lost. Thank you, Alison, and thank you for presenting this report. What we can learn, from my opinion, is I think the solutions on technology. I think we're making great steps on technology. This mobile phone has so many sensors where we can get much information out of it. But we do still make it a product and make it an added value towards agencies, towards advertisers. I think there's a huge step to take there still.
Add anything to that?
In terms of remaining challenges?
Yeah.
Yeah, if we, for example, which is, I think, certainly in a lot of regions, the fastest growing format in that sort of display number, we're still not doing it right it's a common thing for example, video should be really less than 15 seconds, with the first 3 seconds being quite engaging for autoplay formats. We should be looking at presenting video in portrait view or filming it in portrait view. That's why things like this are so popular. I believe Snapchat ads, for example, have had 10 times the interaction in portrait than they do in landscape. The other thing is that Well, it's muted by default. I saw a stat the other day that suggested 85% of all video is viewed in with the mute on, with no sound. And so, we also make sure that basically the standard audio-visual television ad isn't just being translated onto mobile, and something can be recognised or viewed without. So these sorts of things, I think that if the agencies and people who are producing video specifically for mobile start to get better and better at, and start to do shorter, more engaging content that we can view easily, I think we'll start to see some real growth in that space.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
To add to that, I fully agree with Ben. I think it's not only video, but it's for display for data as well. I think we're looking too much into desktop, what we did on desktop, compared to the mobile device, and just use in that form. And I don't think you get the full potential out of it in this way. I think there's a lot more to win if you really look at the mobile device, if you really look how consumers use this device, and adjust your communication on this.
Victor, about the potential for programmatic and mobile, of giving mobile a real opportunity for brand advertisers to reach their audiences at scale.
I think programmatic so far took a huge lift, but we need to be further, and the main drivers for this were Google and Facebook, obvious. It depends how you define programmatic. From my perspective, of course, I work for a publisher, and I think for several European publishers, we still need to make the shift to programmatic. I think there's a big opportunity. It's a distribution channel to connect to a lot of DSPs, and you can use data more easy, but also more effective. In the end, it's still about demand, convincing advertising agency that mobile advertising is mature, and we made huge steps there. We are not there yet, and to add that, I think creativity and the formats are really important in this sport. We need to use the right formats. Ben was also referring to it. Engage your audience and create this impact. I think we are about to set the right formats for now, the high impact formats where we can engage, where we can do activities like swiping, where to measure it. But that's a very important asset also for programmatic.
You used the word journey there, which kind of makes me think about the challenge of Europe as a whole, really. Because within maybe Europe, I guess what we're trying to do is to drive investment into mobile, into digital as a whole across the region, and we're dealing with a backdrop of rich and diverse local markets on that. So I guess it's useful to mention some of the recommendations and insights which we're helping to deliver across the market, which will allow companies to scale their businesses, and also local markets to develop their own specificities on top of those. So I think in the area of research, obviously programmatic is important, and we've developed a significant program around programmatic this year, looking at how to help publishers develop their strategies with a series of specific webinars, with initiatives like this, looking at how mobile research is developing, looking at ad spend, and also looking at things like how ready advertisers are for the mobile challenge. So, for example, we're publishing a study later this year that looks at advertiser sites against a set of best practice criteria across Europe to their readiness to look at what type of campaigns they're implementing and help people learn more about best practice. I think the other area that's important is KPIs. So we published a blueprint earlier this year, and I think we look at mobile specifically as a platform, but also remember that we're trying to make things compatible across media, and thinking about those TV style formats and how we help advertisers to plan audiences and measure their success on the different platforms. So I'd like to bring Joe into the conversation at this point. And Joe, do you want to give us an idea of the work that you're doing in this area at the moment?
Absolutely, for sure. Thank you so much, Alison. In the U.S., well, I guess primarily I would echo what Daniel, Ben, and Victor have all said about creative, and so I think one of the things that's been a key rallying cry as mobile topics for the IAB in the United States has been helping advertisers and media companies alike understand what kinds of ad formats work well in the United States. And so we're just in the final stages of updating all of the IAB's existing desktop legacy ad formats so that they incorporate HTML5 and so that they're just better adapted to mobile screens in a world of diverse devices with diverse capabilities. We've done a lot of work in the past year around in-feed ads as well, helping companies understand how best to deploy them and how they work and why they work. Totally about video, that video is at a very interesting inflection point where a lot of the video on mobile screens these days is just ported TV spots, and I think we all kind of instinctively know that that's not necessarily the optimal, but what is the optimal, and where does something like vertical video work best versus landscape mode video. So I think around creative, I'd say creative has definitely been a key focal point for us in the last year or so. But measurement has as well, and on the measurement front, Alison, I'm going to echo you around KPIs and helping advertisers understand the different ways that they could measure ad engagement or interaction around mobile, and trying to steer people away from just the old click or the tap as the thing that they count towards richer, better forms of that interaction that maybe indicate consumer interest much better. And then the largest measurement initiative we have underway right now is focused on viewability. We are working very closely with the Media Rating Council here in the United States to create mobile-specific viewable impression guidelines. So how do you measure the viewability of ads in mobile web and mobile apps is, I think, a key need for the industry, and something that, again, we're working with a coalition of partners to establish. There's a lot of other things around programmatic and ad technology and some of the other topics that we've talked about, and I guess it's also a rallying cry for us to make mobile part of everything that the IAB in the United States does. Even though we still have a mobile center of excellence that employs me, mobile is and should be a part of everything that the Interactive Advertising Bureau is working on.
Thanks. So I'm thinking about the implications of what you've said in terms of education. You've got a huge program over there for education. Our agencies are sort of at the core of helping people to learn more about the various digital disciplines. Ben, what education is important from your perspective to get to the market?
To the market or to the agency as such?
Well, the agency, and then from the agency's perspective, what do they need to see? What enables their client to really understand and go on the journey with them properly?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that we're starting to, implement and get much better at. That's largely due to changes in technology and data. First of all, I think, mobile has always had lots and lots of data, but now we're only trying to work with partners who provide all those bit of data and where we can basically take that data, store it somewhere and use it again. So, what we're trying to avoid now is doing campaigns which I guess are just put on a plan. There's some data at the end of it, and we can't re-loop that into the learning piece. And I think DMPs and database and data marts and lots of that sort of talk is obviously driving a lot of that. Secondly, I guess we're really trying to change the planning process. It's been touched upon there by Joe as well, in terms of sort of like how we plan. So I think in a tendency, previously when digital first started to put, where you're likely to get a certain audience on the plan and fill a plan that way, whereas of course now we will look at an objective, and then from the objective actually look at the formats that drive that objective. That will then tell us which audiences we need to get to. And then the very last thing you do is you go to partners who can provide inventory for the audience with that format, with that objective. And that's definitely changing the way we think. And I think this all drives towards, not putting mobile in isolation. So, with Pragmatic becoming so, important in the digital world, what we're trying to look forward to is, what is the channel agnostic media plan? How do we start to basically use programmatic as the effectively the execution tool and advertise to people as and when they pop up on any channel? We shouldn't be putting mobile down on plan anymore, but we should have the formats ready to do that.
Absolutely. I wonder if we can go to Victor just to talk about some the European markets and where he sees the increase of advertising spend in mobile coming from. I think that in Europe we've got a particular situation perhaps with the Nordic markets where we see such a high per capita spend on digital that it's interesting to look at how mobile developed in those markets. Do you want to share a couple of thoughts with us on that, Victor?
Of course, yeah. I think we've used the word learning already, and there's so much to learn also in different countries. The next especially is somewhere we can learn regarding display. They have a really mature market, but they also have proven that mobile has its value. For example, it's just an example, but swiping is a new event on mobile, but it's something you should report then. And based on that kind of engagement, there are the things that can convince an advertiser or an agency. And based on that, I think they're ahead of the countries like Germany and Holland and France, for example.
So we need to keep looking there for the great case studies then.
Yeah, but it's for display it's really the Nordics. For native it's really US which are ahead of us. So every region could have its own thing where they stand out.
Yeah, great. Good when out like that, isn't it? So North America's had the highest growth this year, Joe. And what do you think particularly has been driving that?
Thanks, Alison. That's again a really good question and something that I've been thinking about ever since I saw a preview of the model that Daniel and IHS had put together. I think there's really four things that I would point to. One, North America is two or three countries depending on where you place Mexico, but in terms of the ad market, it's really dominated by the sheer size of the United States ad market, and having one very large marketplace for advertising where advertisers are also very used to doing national buys, I think just makes it easier to achieve scale in North America than most other regions of the world where things are more divided based on language or just national preferences or the way mobile is evolving differently in different countries. I think that in the United States, over the last couple of years in particular, as the U.S. has become a first country in the sense of more than half of internet time spent now comes from a smartphone or a tablet. I think marketers are very, very aware of that, the fact that their audience is now spending most of their time on mobile devices and they need to be there. And so it's really forced them to learn and to adapt and to talk to their agencies and technology partners about adapting. That has led to a great deal of experience that's being shared fairly freely in the U.S. at this point. There are more and more case studies and best practices by the IAB, but also by a lot of others as well that help marketers and agencies learn. And then finally, I'll again kind of echo something that's come up several times in the conversation. I think we are seeing very gratifyingly a shift towards better and more effective ad formats around mobile display. In particular, in-feed and video are certainly beginning to become a bigger part of the U.S. Mobile ad landscape, and that helps justify larger spending as well.
Thanks. So we'll move to our Q&A from our audience now. So we've just got a few minutes left for that. So we've got we talked earlier about vertical rather than landscape video, and we've got a question about whether we think there will be more of a move towards vertical video in future, given that given the increase of consumption of video content on smartphones. Want to take you on that?
Sure.
Ben, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, having worked on both sort of the creative and the media side of the business, I know the problems that budgets hold and production and those sort of things. I think, we will start to see more, of course, because it's starting relatively from a low base. But I think what we've really got to do is particularly creative agencies have got to realise that, audio, which at one point was appearing through TV, is now coming back with a vengeance. And if they're going to offer a modern product in 2015, then that product has to include edits and sort of vertical cuts that will basically be able to use social media, mobile advertising, and responsive ads, etc. So I think once production companies and ad agencies start to deliver those formats of service, in other words, you get a full set of prints, you get a full set of cuts, then we'll start to see things, I think, really take off.
Just from an editorial side, very much depends on what type of content you're looking at and what content is embedded in. For short form and for news content at IHS, we're expecting a surge of horizontal video. This is editorial video, whereas for long form, more lean back content consumed through OTT players and so forth, the horizontal dimension will remain the most important. So it really, from an advertising perspective, complicates things even further because you need to have different creatives or different produced creatives for different contexts of mobile consumption.
Yeah, Joe, I totally agree with Daniel. I think that's a very important point that gets lost sometimes in talking about kind of what works best on mobile screens. But the fact is people use their mobile screens in a whole variety of different ways, and so it's impossible to really pick one winner, be it vertical video, landscape mode video, or in-feed, embedded video. I think all three are going to be important, and while again it's probably the thing the creative community wants to hear, but the answer is probably you're going to need to produce video spots that work all of those sorts of placements and orientations to really kind of reach the infinity of the mobile audience.
And perhaps, Daniel, just back to you on a question on the definition of mobile within this report. So, from your perspective, smartphones, tablets, there's a blurring of the lines. So what are we exactly including here? And where do we stop?
It's a very tricky question. It sounds simple, but it is incredibly complicated. First, we remember that this is a meta-analysis. So each local IAB has a different definition of mobile, which we need to harmonize. Mobile is an umbrella category for us. Everything that isn't desktop is included. So this is smartphones, this is tablets, etc. But we are seeing a change in how account for mobile ad revenues. And it goes back to a point I mentioned initially, which is that mobile used to be separate from everything else. It was very clear that budgets were mobile budgets. Interestingly, in particular in video, which in this webinar we've identified as a major growth driver, we see that campaigns are booked across different platforms. So that means that when companies report their revenues to IABs or to the SEC, they can't necessarily single out mobile revenues. So what we do as an emerging practice within the community is to take the overall ad spend generated by a campaign and then distribute it into different types of screens based on the volume of impressions or the volume of views across different devices which a campaign has received.
I think that's just about it for questions that are coming in from the floor. There's a few, but I think we've mainly addressed most of those in the conversation so far. So I'd really like to thank today's presenters, Daniel, Ben, Victor and Joe. Thanks very much for your time today in preparation on this report. As we've said, it is a really important report for the market. We're now in our 4th year, so we've clocked up some years with it already, and I'm really proud of everybody's efforts on that. So thanks for joining us. As we mentioned, the report's going to be available on the IAB Europe website and a webinar recording also. And also you will see at the end a short survey. We appreciate your feedback. You'll be able to tell us how you think the webinar went and whether there are any other topics you'd like to see future webinars on. So thank everyone for your input today, and talk to you again soon.
Definitely. Alison?
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.